1, 2, 3, 4.
You always have to think about what is the world of this movie. A good example is in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's a joke early on where this guy's waving this sword around and Harrison Ford's character just pulls out a gun and shoots him and everybody laughs. Well, you can name 3 or 4 Spielberg movies where there's nothing funny about somebody shooting somebody. There's nothing funny in Saving Private Ryan when somebody shoots somebody. Well, that's just a different world.
Why did you not accept Steven Spielberg's offer to direct Schindler's List? It's closer to your experience, isn't it?
Schindler's List was really about Krakow Ghetto.
Yeah.
That's where I was.
Yeah.
To do a film about that particular ghetto and the people who went with Schindler, it's too close on one hand and too far on the other. Too close because it deals with the days and with things, with walls, with streets that I know intimately, and too far because it deals with this group of people who were saved by working for Schindler. If I were to go through the pain of recreating it all, I would rather go do something about my own childhood, about my own persona and people around me. I was brought up, you know, as a pampered child until all that happened. I had loving parents, particularly my mother. My father also loved me. My mother was really close to me at that age. It's rather, you know, the family romance. And that's how it ended.
What age was your mother when she was deported?
She must have been 30, somewhere like 37 or 38.
And do you have strong memories of her?
Yes, I have memories of her. Strong, no.
I
have
imagine.
Memories of her songs. I have memories of her makeup. I have memories of her smile. She was a great mother.
Certainly I grew up watching movies and television. I think I wrote novels before I did movies and television because I didn't know anybody in the movie or TV business. I didn't know how you got into it. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know anybody who had ever published a piece of fiction either, but I could sit down and write a story without anybody else's help, without raising money. So while I was working in whatever I was working in, hospitals or factories, whatever, I could come home and sit down and write a story. You know, I could afford a typewriter and carbon paper back in the carbon age, this is, you know, before computers. And I could write the thing and then kind of send it off, and, you know, they'd send it back, you know, if you included the postage. So who knows what, you know, I could have been. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I kind of liked telling stories.
What sort of books were you reading in those days? Were there certain things that...
Along the way, there were some people who were really interested. Nelson Algren is one, just because of, I think that he spread his net to understand how people thought, and people who usually weren't even considered. It didn't matter, you know, you could be the lowest junkie in the world. He was interested in your emotions and your thought, and said that you had them.
My father's poems were always about the microcosm which was surrounding our house near Parma in the countryside. What I learned from my father was that poetry is in the daily life surrounding us. Just have to be able to see it. It's not something that is in the books, something that you learn at school, something that you have to look and listen, read with reverence. Somebody gave me a Payard Bolex, a little 16 mil, the one that you charge it with a spring, like that. And I shot my first movie. I was 16 years old, and the movie was in 16 mils, so it was perfect.
I was a messenger boy. I was working in Cheapside, and I came to deliver a package, and I came on the underground and got out at Green Park, and I looked across and saw those telephone boxes on a fruit stall and what I now know to be the Ritz.
Yeah.
And as I saw it for the first time, I had this really, I guess it was my first sort of real deja vu experience.
Oh yeah.
I knew that I had never been here, but at the same time there was a sense of extraordinary familiarity.
Yeah.
It was a really profound thing, and I only understood much later in my life that somehow I was destined to be here.
I'll tell you the truth, the times that if I'm flipping around on television, for instance, and one of my old films comes on that I haven't seen or thought of for years and years, then I have a tendency to want to watch it for 10 or maybe 15 minutes. But then I'll usually flip off because I begin to see more wrong than I see right in what I was doing. The glory of acting to me, and why I really respect it so much as a craft and as what can be an art, is because it can go beyond just entertaining. With the right material and the right part, an actor can do something that very few of us have the chance to do, and that is to move somebody and to enlighten them and make them think in a way that they never would have thought if they had not seen that performance.
The reason it's so hard to go back and see your own stuff is because it's a lose-lose proposition. On one hand, you can go back and see it and say, God, that was good. You know, I was really talented then. Whatever happened to my talent? The other reaction is to go back and look at it and say, Jesus, that was no good. I didn't have any talent then.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have any talent now. So whatever reaction you have, you know, is debilitating.
Oh, yeah.
So it's better just to stay away.
As far as my work is concerned, I'm a kind of stoical kind of person, really. It's just, I sort of deal with those things myself. And I guess that's the same, I'm the same now. I mean, if I'm in trouble on a movie, it's something that I feel I have to solve. It's part of the performance. It's part of the way I access my own ability, is by addressing those difficulties. And I've rarely ever taken anybody on a film location with me, because it's sort of...
A partner, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, I saw once Arthur Ashe in Schiphol Airport, and all he had was his racket. And I totally identify with that.
I really love. I really do love. I really do love. I love. And I hate. And I hate. And I hate. And because I love. Because I love, I hate. Because I love, I hate. Because I love. Because I love. You motherfuckers! The emotion comes out of, emotional memory and sense memory.
Could you describe how sense memory works?
You have to trick your subconscious. I mean, you tell a story, and when you tell a story about, you say, well, my mother died when I was a kid, or my mother slapped me one time, or so on. You don't feel anything. Nothing happens. You have to forget what happened, basically, and you have to relax and wipe yourself clear of, like, you know, of any preconceived ideas of what it's about. Then you have to try to find all the tension areas in your body and so on and so forth, and, like, you know, and just relax. And then you have to go back through, like, things like, what was I wearing that day? And then it's what can you see? Can you see the table? Can you see anything? Can you hear anything? And you go through your senses: seeing, smell, taste, hearing, touch. And then one of these things will bring back the emotion of what happened at that time, you know. We know this town, don't we? We know where we are. Okay. All right. Let's cool it out here. You sort of build up a repertoire of these various emotions. It's, I think Stanislavski called it your golden box, and you only open it. You have to keep replacing these emotional memories, because every time you use one, you have to keep filling up the box again with new memories, because you can wear them out.
Yeah, but I heard the director of True Grit said to you when you were working with John Wayne.
Duke doesn't dig that method shit, you know. Yeah.
That's probably accurate. You know, usually you know, my MO is kind of, I'm attracted to things that challenge me, and they also, because of that, they kind of repulse me at the same time. You know, I feel, I'm not sure if I'm going to pull this off.
If that's the case, then does that mean you're often nervous during filming or before filming?
Yeah.
And what do you do about that?
Well, over the years, I've learned to kind of make friends with my fear, that doesn't go away, that's always with you. A big turning point was The Iceman Cometh. And most of my scenes were with Robert Ryan, who I was a big fan of. And we were doing a scene, and it was across the table like we're sitting here, and there was a table, and he had his hands on the table. And we hear, okay, we're ready to go, guys. And we say, okay. And he takes his hand away, and there's a big puddle of sweat on the table. And I said to him, "Guy, Bob, you're nervous, you're scared." And he said, "Oh yeah, I'd really be scared if I wasn't scared. You know, it's okay, you know." And I took that to heart, and I thought, yeah, that's right. Even this old seasoned pro who's been doing it for so long is nervous and is concerned about pulling it off, and that's always going to be with me, I guess. So I better get used to it, and you know, as the old saying goes, try to use it, you know.
What's very interesting though is Robert Ryan, you think of him as Mr. Laid Back, and one critic said Jeff Bridges is the most naturalistic actor there's ever been, and yet if you and he are both somewhat anxious about performing, why does that anxiety not show?
Well, the key word is act. You're acting, pretending, you know. So you're pretending.
It's hard to hide anxiety.
Yeah. Sometimes.
That's why they pay
Yeah,
you.
that's it. That's it.
$2.
Do you remember the scene towards the end of the picture where the man who's been working in the pawn shop with you, Jesus, is killed?
Yes.
And you're on the streets.
Yes.
It's a very documentary scene shot by
Yeah.
Boris Kaufman.
Well, that was something interesting because Jesus is lying there in his position, and I'm trying to convince myself that's my daughter Anna. That's who it is. Anna, my lovely Anna. And she's there. So I got that. Then one of the hardest things in movies is to hold it without losing its depth until the bloody lights are ready, till the camera's ready, till the other actor's ready, and you go crazy saying, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that. That's for the scene. That's right. It's my child there. That's right. So in the script, I'm supposed to lift my head up and scream. Months before, I had seen Picasso's painting of the burning of Guernica. Now here's a painting in grays and blacks and whites, and the people don't even look like people, they look like birds' heads with the sharp tongue sticking out, and this woman on the top of this building in the window. And it was one of the loudest screams I ever heard in my life. I put my head back, I remembered Guernica, and I said, don't make a sound. And it was twice as powerful.
Donald Sutherland, your friend Kate Nelligan, said the truth about Donald Sutherland is that he doesn't know that he has talent. She's, of course, saying that you do have talent, but you're not convinced that you have it.
Oh, no, she's incorrect. I am convinced that I have it. It might only be a little bit. I think what you need in your life is a little bit of talent, some chance, some good luck, an extraordinary amount of hard work, and a wonderful partner. And I have been blessed with those four things. And my life has been a happy one. It's not necessary how big the talent is. It's how well you use it And I think in the end of things, when I look back and add things up, I've used it pretty well.
The bombs are falling on Vietnam, but it is an American tragedy. And it will take the American people many, many, many years to wipe out the blight of this war, and particularly the barbaric crimes of the Richard Nixon administration, which are escalating daily. I believe that the people in this country who were speaking out against the war are the patriots.
You said at one point that she was like the basis of the rest of your life. I was fascinated you used this phrase, she brought me out of the emotional and intellectual closet. What does that mean? What has this woman got?
She was terrific. Yeah, I don't know whether she brought me out of the intellectual closet, but certainly I just had an extraordinary love affair with her that allowed me to have a terrific sensual, sexual, loving life after it, you know, with no regrets, just a great deal of joy and the wish that she have happiness till the end of her life, you know. I don't see her. Francine and I saw her in Paris, 5 years ago, maybe even longer than that. But it's part of our business. You're doing work for 6 months or whatever it is. You're having sometimes profound intellectual, emotional relationships. I have very few friends that I keep in touch with. And Francine and I have lived in Paris for a long time. My farm in Canada, I have a couple of friends there, but really it's away from the madding crowd. My friends, a lot of them are dead. They're dead, but they're living in my mind. My mother and father are dead, my sister's dead, my half-sister's dead, my half-brother's dead.
And you could say...
my niece died in my arms of breast cancer. It's a catastrophic... She was 45.
Did the fact that a lot of your friends die have simply a depressive effect, or is there something more positive?
No, not depressive, no. Yeah. No, but it's a little bit like, my mother had died, and then 6 months my father. But I was on my way to see him, and the phone rang. It was Francine. She said, your father's died. Now you're an orphan. Now I have you all to myself. Oh, I do hope I die before she does. That's what I tell you. That's for sure. But she's the most beautiful, exquisite person I've ever encountered in my life. We've been 30 years together, and all I look forward to is seeing her when I wake up. You know.
It struck me reading previous interviews that you kept talking about how inspiring the 3 Fs were: Fonda, Francine, and Fellini. These 3 people keep coming together, to sort of boost you.
I got it. The first one is Francine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sticking on this cheery subject of death, you made 2 films about the death of a child, Don't Look Now and Ordinary People, incredibly different films. I've got here near the beginning of Don't Look Now where you have a premonition that your daughter is dying. One of the most memorable scenes, I think, in cinema.
What's the matter?
Nothing.
Seem to be finding it hard to look at this, are you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. He's brilliant, Nick Roeg. One of the great visionaries because of the way he edits, the way he lights, the way he sees things, and in that particular picture, we would have done anything. Nick and I thought that maybe I would die in the process of it. So much were we committed. I mean, we were so fatalistic about the way the production was going. The scene where I dangle from a rope in there, that's real, that's me. I have vertigo, and I cured it in that picture. Because the stuntman said, the insurance is wrong, I'm not going to do this. You're hanging 50 feet above a marble floor, you fall, you're dead. He said, I'm not going to do it. And Nick said, what are we going to do? We have this church for one day. I said, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. So I climb up the darn thing. I've got a harness on with a Kirby wire. We attach the Kirby wire to the rope up through my sleeve. They throw a 2x10 at me, hit me in the back. The thing falls apart. I drop down. I'm on the Kirby wire. Nick has told me, you're just going to drop down. We'll pull you right in. He's so excited by the fact that he's got this actor hanging 50 feet over there. He's got two guys with sticks pushing me off. I'm swirling like that in the middle of the thing. I saw Vic Armstrong, who's one of the great stunt coordinators in the world a couple of years later, and he said, that was a brave thing. I said, that was nothing. I mean, really, I had a Kirby wire. He said, you had a Kirby wire? I said, yeah. He said, but you went like this. I said, yeah, I went like that. He said, well, when you go like that with a Kirby wire, the Kirby wire snaps. I was, but it was like that. The whole picture was like that. It was an extraordinary experience, so much so that Francine and I named our firstborn after Nick. But in French, my wife is French-Canadian, Quebecoise. Roeg, sounds like rug. And it was, when he was born, she looked at him and he thought he was, she said, it's not a good name, Roeg. I said, okay, and we'll call him Spencer. So we called him Spencer. He was 3 days old when Nick came in with a teddy bear, a bouquet of flowers, a bottle of champagne. He said, where's my boy? I said, Nick, this is Spencer. He said, what do you mean, Spencer? His name's Roeg. I said, Roeg, okay. so that's what this 26-year-old is named, Roeg.
You should be very proud to carry Roeg's name. Apparently the day after you did the Vertigo shot, you did the famous extraordinary sex scene.
But see now, what's interesting about that scene, before you look at it, let's talk about it for a second. These are two people who don't know each other and who aren't doing anything. But the fact that he cut it together by none of it is voyeuristic. It just reminds you of having made yourself. The times in your own past when some wonderful love affair that you've had. And the way that he did that was he never stayed on the lovers. You were there, then they were getting dressed. You were there, then you were getting dressed. And it's intercut like that all the time. And it saved it. And the only reason why it's good is because it lives in people's memory, as opposed to being something that you watch and think, oh God,
Yeah. See these matches of clothes.
Yeah, I know.
Is it directed? Is it heavily directed, or is it?
Oh, incredibly! No, heavily directed. Heavily directed. All the way through that, you were just alone in the room with Nick and Tony Richmond, two unblimped Aeroflexes, and Nick is saying, you get like that, and Nick is saying, all right, Donald, put your mouth on Julie's breast. All right, Julie, come. It's like that.
It's not just accidental cuts?
No.
It's not
No, nothing of Nick is accidental. Nothing. It's all in his imagination, and he fuses it on the film. No, every position he told us to go into.
L'amour peut naître d'un regard. Jeanne, en un instant, sentit mourir sa gêne et sa pudeur.
You must have thought this would be scandalous.
No, I didn't think about that. When I do things, I don't think about the effect of what I'm doing is going to have.
Yeah.
It was an act of love. I loved Louis. I was in love with him passionately. I'm still in love with him, and he asked me to do it, and that was my gift to him.
Even though, as you've said before, though, doing this sex scene was a poisoned gift because it destroyed your intimacy with Louis.
Yes, it was a poison gift, I knew, because after that we didn't live together anymore. But I don't regret it. Our relationship was marvelous, and even when the life together was over, doesn't matter. I know that nothing lasts.
And so many of your films are about the end of love. There's even in this film, there's a hint that maybe this new relationship will not last.
Exactly.
And so,
with the white horse.
Yeah, yeah.
The white horse is there because of me.
Uh-huh.
I asked for the white horse. I said to Louis, do you know that as a child, I was taught by my grandfather in England, when you see a white horse, you say, white horse, give me good luck to me, good luck to you, and good luck to every white horse like you. And you spit, and you should never look at the horse again. So I said, I want a white horse for the last shot. Good luck for the film.
Yeah, and I can't think of a film of yours which the love relationships last.
Well, I don't see any films. Any films.
But of yours?
No, but of others.
Yeah.
Well, the love.
Do you ever wish that you had had a single man in your life all your life, just one constant lover throughout your whole life?
Why should I dream about a thing like that? If it was supposed to happen to me, it would have happened.
Yeah. When you split from Louis Malle, you told a story in a documentary once that you were very unhappy, I think, and you wanted to write to Ingmar Bergman.
I did write to Ingmar Bergman.
Yeah. Isn't that a very unusual thing to do, to write to someone whom you'd never met? Did you not have like female friends you could just go and say, look, I feel...
I wouldn't talk about that to a female friend.
Why?
I knew that Ingmar Bergman would understand. No, I didn't expect any answer. Could have been a writer I've never met. Of course, I knew Virginia Woolf was dead. I wouldn't write to Virginia Woolf, and anyway, being an English woman, the life she led, I wouldn't write to Virginia Woolf. But having seen films of Ingmar Bergman, I knew that he would understand. The film that has disappeared, called The Deep, he would say things to me, and he would say, you just repeat. So I would repeat. And he said, turn your head on the right. So I did, and on the left. And close your eyes. And now look at me, and now cry. So I did everything he did.
But you're Jeanne Moreau, you're not some starlet. Why would it be satisfying for you to do that?
Well, I mean, I loved that.
Why?
It was an incredible communication with Orson.
But you're just a puppet?
No, I was not a puppet. I was feeding him. As much as he did feed me, as much did I feed him. I know that I was provocative. He was provocative, but it was an exchange. It was like love-making. We were the two of us, alone in the whole world. He knew he could dwell inside of me, inside the most intimate emotions. He didn't ask out of the blue, now please cry. He knew I could. I wouldn't do that with a nobody. Not because I wouldn't want to, but that person, he was playing, I was his instrument.
A lot of what you do is just try to, how can I help this actor do their best work? And it's one of the things that I always try to think about, and it's a very good acting exercise, which is when you get stalled in a scene, when something isn't working, very often, and I'm trying to think, how can I help people? It's because people are playing the end of the scene at the beginning of the scene. You're playing Lincoln nobly when he's still splitting rails, when he didn't know he was going to be a lawyer, much less president of the United States or anything like that. So if you can back up a little bit and say, I know we've done 11 takes, but when you come up to her and say, do you want to go out with me? What if she says no? You know, you're already anticipating her saying yes. You know, your momentum is moving in that way. You know, and sometimes you'll even just take the other actor aside and say, okay, just say no. You know, and then all of a sudden that actor who's gotten stale or is anticipating something they shouldn't be anticipating has to react. And it may not work on that take, but the next time they come up to that person, they don't know which way they're going to go. If it's a complicated scene, it may be 30 takes before they're really in their money shot, their close-up. They still don't know what that person's going to say when they throw something out.
Do you have the patience for going like 30 takes around, or are you quietly getting things?
No, I have the patience to do anything. I have to watch my actors and help them and handicap them a little bit. So some actors are much better their first couple takes, and then it's really hard for them to get it back. So you handicap a little. You find out, well, who's in my scene? 2 or 3 people. Who's best on their first takes? Well, we're going to try to point at them first. Who needs a little warm-up? Well, we're going to be over their shoulder for a while. And you try to learn that very quickly, because very often you're working with actors you haven't worked with before.
It was one of those things that actors have to be very careful of. The part began to take me over instead of me controlling the part. Now, in Save the Tiger, the guy was walking around having a nervous breakdown, and I didn't realize the extent to which I was involved. I started cracking up on the way driving to work in the morning. And then about the 3rd morning when this was happening, apparently I was sobbing like mad while I was driving down the freeway. And a cop pulled me over, and he recognized me, and he said, "Are you okay, Mr. Lemon?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I was thinking about a scene that we're going to do." And he says, "Well," he says, "I'm going to follow you." He said, "Just, to make sure you're okay." Once I knew it, never happened again. I was okay. This was about halfway through the film.
It's all garbage!
You hear me?
No, sorry to stop it already, but you see when you're clutching your stomach there?
Yeah.
I heard that Cukor said to you, what would you do really if you were doing this scene? And you said, I feel I would throw up. Is that right?
Yeah. I told him that when I get really mad, I get sick to my stomach. And so he said, use it. Do it. So he did it.
Do you know what's very interesting, Jack? Having watched all your films very recently, again and again in your performances, you clutch your stomach as if in some way your characters are all these people who have got ulcers, people who are sort of in some way too anxious about the world.
I think a lot of it, is unconscious too.
Yeah. Okay, let's watch the end of this.
John was wonderful with actors. He never embarrassed you, never gave you any kind of direction in front of other people. He always put his arm around you and walk you over to one side, which, a lot of directors do not do. They love to humiliate actors. And the atmosphere on the set was always very professional, but friendly. He was much easier to communicate with than Hawks. Hawks was intimidating. He was an intimidating man, because we used to call him the Great White Father, or the Old Gray Fox, because he would laugh like this. No guffaws from him, where John Huston, ha-ha,
Marilyn had never had a dressing room before, so they gave her first dressing room, and she was afraid to come out on the set. She would get there much earlier than I did. I would get completely dressed in an hour, and other actresses would come in anywhere from 5:30 on, and you had to be on the set at 9 o'clock. I would come in at 8, and they would have my breakfast ready, and they would be rolling my hair dry, and I'd be I was on the set at 9. Well, Marilyn wasn't there, and she'd been in since 5 or 5:30. So her makeup man told my makeup man, Shotgun, that Marilyn was just nervous about coming out. He says, she's all ready, but she just, And Howard Hughes was getting a little irritated. Hawks, I mean. And so I would go by her dressing room, and I'd say, come on, Blondie, let's go. It's almost time. And she'd, oh, okay, all right. And she'd get up and we'd trot on the set. And she was never late. She didn't know anybody out there. And she was working with someone that had made a whole bunch of pictures.
I liked her very much, and we got along great. And I knew that she had problems, and that she was not happy. I didn't know why, but I knew that she was basically not happy. It was none of my business. I never pushed it, and we never got close enough for me to find out what her troubles may have been. I mean, we all know she had troubles, but the biggest problem really was not that, it was her lateness.
Yeah.
Because she just would not come onto the set and shoot until she felt ready. And it was not temperament at all. It really was a psychological thing with her. Until she could face that camera, she wouldn't do it.
You know, I never had a good relationship with my father. And that was very important to me because I have 6 sisters. I was the only boy. And I wouldn't want my father to give me a pat on the back. He never did. When I did Champion and there was a lot of hullabaloo, I went to see him. So I go, "Hi, Pa." I said, "You know, I made a movie, Champion." "Yeah." And I said, "Well, did you see it?" He said, "Yeah." Well, I said, "Do you like it?" He said, "Yeah." That's the end of the conversation. Not very satisfactory. But I never, all my life, I knew my father loved me and he was proud of whatever I accomplished. But it was very difficult for him to express an emotion. And I missed it very much.
What?
Jesus is more powerful than any demon.
Oh, go fuck yourself. Go on, wait.
Just leave it.
Oh, yeah, just listen to your little brother here. Wait, just leave it. Candy asses. All of you. I know what I've got for children. Jesus freaks and candy asses.
In that family, love is this, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I love you. The loved one gets the beatings.
Yeah. You must have felt some personal connection with these characters. It's a small town like the town where you grew up. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, I know these people. I grew up with them. I was not the product of an alcoholic, abusive father. I had a very strong father, and I have an older brother, but it's not necessarily my story. It's a little more autobiographical to Russell, the novelist. And the film ends rather bleakly, you know, and the films I have written on my own tend to end with a kind of grace note.
Yes.
There is no grace note here. There was no grace note in the novel, and I did not add one.
If you had to choose a film that you were most proud of, could you choose one?
I think Affliction, probably.
The film for which you got your Oscar.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, The Magnificent Seven, the Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid with Peckinpah.
Let's wind the clock back. You were born in 1928, and your father was a garage man, is that right?
He owned a garage, yeah.
Garage.
He was the Ford representative in Laurel, Nebraska, yeah.
And the business failed at the time of the Depression, and you
That's
were
right, yeah.
one of that whole, your family's one of that whole migration to California that
Yeah.
John Steinbeck writes about.
Well, yeah, but they went out in, you know, in their covered wagons almost, but we drove a Model A Ford, and we had a little trailer in the back of it, and I think it took us like 5 days. One of the great trips of my life, and I remember it. I was just 4 years old, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It was just a wonderful trip. I learned about automobiles from my father. From my mother, who was a school teacher, I learned how to learn, actually. And I learned freedom from her.
When you say you learned freedom, do you mean to think for yourself?
And to express for myself, yeah. To express, I think, really, that kind of freedom. To not have to be so conditioned to have to say something, because there was so much negativity going on. And you know, she was great. She was the last one to die. My father died before she did, and with arthritis and a heart attack and all of that.
You were a radio operator in the war, and then you studied drama in California, and then you got a part in Billy Budd.
Yeah, I got an equity card, got $23 a week, and I had about $45. And we got in a car and drove to New York. I had a friend there, and she said, well, you got to study with Stella Adler. I said, that's why I'm here. And so, you know, that began that part of me.
And what did you learn from Stella Adler?
Style, mainly. That's what she was dealing with. She said, I assume everybody could act. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We're going to deal with style now, personal style and dramatic style. You know?
What do you mean by style?
Style.
Graceful movement?
That's part of it, yeah. But style is, you know, like you find a stylized piece, like, for instance, Restoration has a particular kind of style. Shakespeare has a particular kind of style. And she would say, go to the museum and look at the paintings and find a style for yourself.
See, that's very different, isn't it, from what was establishing in those days the method acting, which was a kind of unraveling, a soul searching, where she seemed to be teaching something very different.
Yeah, well, she assumed that you could do all of that stuff because that's all rehearsal. You use all of that in rehearsal and you find out what's happening inside. And then you have to present it out. You just can't be doing this. That was the most dull, boring kind of acting there is. The only guy that could really do it was Brando, and he had a lot of style.
Brando and Monty Clift and Jimmy Dean.
And they were stylists,
Yeah.
you know, like they just didn't do it. They stylized it.
What do you think of someone like Marlon Brando who thinks that acting is an undignified thing for a man to spend his life doing? Do you think it's been dignified for you to do acting?
You know, like it's up to him. Marlon, he can think whatever he wants to think about acting. You know, it's just a shame that he didn't have more respect for it because he's such a giant in that world. I mean, he has such great talent as an actor. I don't know why he feels that.
One of the early classics of the 60s, Magnificent Seven.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get involved in that picture? And why did you get involved in that picture?
You'll never believe it. It was just a miracle. I'd seen Kurosawa's Seven Samurai when I was in New York, and it was the first Japanese film that I'd ever seen. And I saw this character, the greatest swordsman in the world. I thought, my God, what a great character. There he is. He's a wonderful actor. At the very end, the bandit is in behind the thing, and he shoots the guy, and he, like that, and he walks around in a circle, and it's raining, you know, and he throws his sword away, and then falls over. I mean, really. I saw Bobby Vaughn one day, and I said, what are you doing? He said, we're doing Seven Samurai. And I said, you're doing what? And I had no idea that the thing was even being put together. And he said, where's it being done? And he said, well, John Sturges is directing it. Steve's in it. And I said, really?
Steve McQueen?
Yeah. And I said, who else is in it? He said, well, geez, I don't know all of them, but Eli Wallach's going to do a part, and Brad Dexter, and I think there's Horst Buchholz. And he said, I said, has it all been cast? He said, I don't think so. And I said, well, I got to go see John Sturges. And he said, there's one of the seven that haven't been cast yet. And I said, really? What part is that? He said, well, that's Britt. That's the guy with the knife. And I said, is that the role with the greatest swordsman in the world? He said, yeah, that's the one. I said, that's the part I want to play, man. And he called up at 3 o'clock and said, you got the role. Come on over and pick up your knives. Kurosawa's character at the end was shot in the back by a half-blind bandit with his musket, you know. But because we didn't have a way of shooting that ending, we didn't have a way of making that, you know, because the guns were already there, you know, like when I was trying to throw a thing at the end. So there really wasn't that irony that I wanted to get at the end.
Oh! Hey, Toro!
Corey Allen, who's the other man here, he catches Jimmy and actually clips him
And Nick sees that Jimmy's been hit with the knife, and he says, "Cut, cut, cut!" And Jimmy gets furious and grabs Nick and says, "Don't ever, ever say cut. Don't ever, ever say cut to me. I'll say cut if something's wrong. Don't you ever cut the scene." He really cut me, and this is part of the scene, and I want that reality. And was furious and walked off the set, and it took a while before we started shooting again. He told me you must start doing things and not showing them. Watching him act, I've never in my life seen anybody as good an actor as he was. So, it reminds one of to me the most important thing that was ever said about creation was Rainer Maria Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, where he advises this young poet, no matter what kind of poor and indifferent life you have, to find poetry in it. And you must ask yourself, in the stillest moment of your night, if it were denied you to create, would you die? And if your answer is yes, then you have no choice but to be an artist.
I used to fly around quite a bit, I took a lot of unnecessary chances. And I started racing, and now I drive on the highways, I'm extra cautious. Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine.
Which way we headed? Dean was a very good friend of mine. And he and I were alike in one way, that we didn't make friends that easily. And I was very pleased that he trusted me, and I was like at times, like his older brother or something. I said, "Why don't we have lunch?" He said, "All right, you come to the VIP lounge of Warner Brothers, I'll get the pass." And so I had lunch with him. And I remember he was eating this steak. And this is the thing that worried me most. He was almost more than halfway through with it, and he says to the waiter, "Darling, would you come in, please? I don't like this steak, I like another one." And the poor woman didn't know what to do because the steak was more than half eaten. She said, "But you always eat in half." He said, "This is Hollywood, sweetheart." I said, "I like another one." And I said to myself, "Bonsoir. Goodbye, James. Goodbye." And maybe his early death might have been a blessing for him, because he was getting in with the wrong crowd, he was getting into narcotics, might have smirched everything he had done, I mean, it sounds cruel to say that, but in an exaggerating way. And I was upset because I didn't think he'd fall for that crap.
I remember. I said, "I'll wait for you." We were in the Rockies, and the AD said, "Mr. Stewart, you really can go back to the ranch, and because we've got your close-up, And Jimmy Stewart said, "Well, no," he said, "I think I'll just hang around, and I'll be off camera for my friends here." And in other words, he stayed the whole afternoon so that he could be off camera for our scene to relate to. You know how many people would have done that?
And did that help you?
Oh, of course. What, as opposed to a script girl reading it, or looking at a black thing with an X on it, and that's Jimmy? I mean, you can't get any, what can you get? You don't get any connection.
Weird. It's very weird. Last week, James Coburn, the actor, told me that when Greta Garbo was doing her close-ups, she used a mirror. So she would talk to herself in the mirror. The mirror would be, isn't that extraordinary?
She would talk to herself?
Yeah, she would have a mirror. So instead of Melvin Douglas or John Gilbert, there would be a mirror. I think that's so bizarre, isn't it?
That really, how do you connect with the other people?
I don't know. I think that's maybe why she toned down so much. I have no idea.
It would seem to me that maybe she had the mirror just to make sure that she was being lit and looked all right.
Yeah.
But
perhaps. But
how could you relate to? I mean,
very odd.
Doing a love story, doing a love scene with yourself.
Don't ask. It's very weird. I've got the ending here of Naked Spur. Also, it's where Jimmy Stewart decides in the end to give up being a bounty hunter. Here it is.
I'm gonna sell him for money. Oh, look at him. He's so wonderful.
This is where he makes the moral decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not to bring back the body, to get the money.
To get the money. think of Jimmy, he was so good. What a professional. Great man. And a very moving picture.
You still want to try California?
If you want.
That's it then.
Quite a surprising picture, very ambitious.
Yeah.
And by withdrawing slightly, were you a happy person at this time? You were obviously famous and traveling a lot, and you had a new family and everything. Were you happy?
Yes, yes, tremendously so. Overjoyed, because it had been, we were married in 51, so it was 5 years later before I had Kelly. I had a miscarriage, a couple of miscarriages. So, you know, we very much were hoping for a baby. It's a big moment.
But then I had my first child, Michael.
Heard of him?
And I didn't have any money. So it came out California because of Lauren Bacall. We were friends. I made a screen test, and my first picture was The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. And they want me to smoke, and I never smoked. So I started to smoke. I remember the first day I got sick, you know, from the cigarettes, but that's how Hollywood corrupts me.
Absolutely, and look at you now.
Yes, but now I don't smoke.
But he said, well, you go to Bud Schulberg, that's the writer. He wrote a script called On the Waterfront. You read the taxi scene with him, and if he likes you, you can play Marlon Brando's brother. Well, I almost fell on the floor because this is some colleague to work with, you know. It's almost a love scene between two brothers. I don't mean sexually, but it's just, even though one is doing something wrong, it's still your brother. Charlie is the weaker one. He fell in love with luxury and the ladies, and he kind of sold himself. And sooner or later, he didn't realize it, but it brought him in direct opposition to his brother. And the rest more or less is history. And then sometimes I feel if I see the taxi scene one more time, I'll shoot myself, you know, because this scene has become identified as one of the supposedly great scenes in cinema or something.
Well, I hope you don't have a gun, because here it comes, the taxi scene.
I had a hunch it might sneak in. I didn't know.
Now, this wasn't in the script, this coming through the smoke. But this is part of what I see in the city all the time, and it's one of the last shots we got on the movie, actually. And I decided that that's the way the picture should open. A couple of critics, one critic felt that it was, said the metaphors, New York as hell, he said that's about as deep as the film gets. And I didn't mean it for that. I didn't mean it as a metaphor of any kind. It's just the image of this impending danger coming through the smoke, you know, but these are wise guys, what can you do?
We did Brando's close-up, and I was off camera, and when you're off camera working with another actor, you do your nut. You overdo it to help them with reaction. And acting is reacting, so we're very dependent on each other. And that son of a gun went home when it was time for my close-ups. And I never forgot that. It was like a wounding. I couldn't believe a man that talented would walk out. And I had to do my close-up with the stage manager sitting with his script saying, right? So it must have burned his rear end. We came out even in that scene, you know.
Absolutely. And this is sort of the eyes here has always reminded me of the look of the eyes of De Niro here, and also later on in the film he's looking in the mirror, in the rearview mirror, very much taken from the close-ups of eyes of Tales of Hoffman of Robert Helpman.
I wrote it in a rather dire period of my life. I was not a screenwriter at that time. I was a critic. And a number of things had gone wrong in my life, and I ended up in a period where I was drifting, living in a car, and had this pain in my stomach, and went to the emergency room, and turned out I had a bleeding ulcer. And I realized when I was there that I hadn't really spoken to anyone in weeks. You know, I had just been drifting around. And this metaphor of the taxi driver occurred to me, that I was like this person in an iron coffin, surrounded by people, but absolutely alone, you know. You know, in many ways, I wrote that script so I would not become that character.
You said it leapt out of you like an animal or something?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it had to be written. So it was written as therapy, and I therefore got involved in films for the best reason possible, which you see less and less of today. You know, I got involved because I needed to get involved.
You say, I've got about 20 questions in the result of that. The first thing I want to ask is, that's an extraordinary idea that you think that Taxi Driver in some way has a kind of ameliorating influence on people. Is that what you mean? That people who are potentially psychotic can watch this and...
They see, hopefully it will do for them in some fashion what it did for me, was to put that kind of self-absorption, that kind of festering, masochistic, narcissistic anger in a context.
I'd like to look at the end of the picture, which is incredibly close to how you wrote it. And in fact, you wrote the script many years before it was filmed. Here's a little bit of the ending. You say of Travis, he forms his bloody hand into a pistol and raises it to his forehead. His voice, croaking in pain, makes the sound of a pistol discharging. Travis's head slumps on the sofa. Live sound ceases. Overhead, slow motion tracking shot surveys the damage. Now you're almost writing as a director. You're writing the shots.
It's the only camera direction in the whole script.
Yes.
I don't believe that writers should write camera instructions.
Yeah.
I don't write them for myself. I don't write them for others. The only exception to that rule is when you can only express a certain mood by camera instruction. And the mood in that case was complete detachment from the events, a kind of God's eye floating view. And in order to get the idea of a God's eye floating view, I had to do an explanation of an overhead tracking dolly. Otherwise, I would never put camera instructions in a script.
Let's have a look at this famous ending that is anticipated so much in your screenplay.
This is a shot from Hitchcock. It's from Marnie. I mean, I know Scorsese. I know, it's a shot from Marnie.
This is precisely as you wrote it.
Yeah.
And did you know that Marty Scorsese would shoot it as you wrote it?
I didn't know Marty when I wrote it.
I know you didn't. But once he got on board, did you know that he would write it, he would shoot it?
No, it was that's his bailiwick, you know. This shot, we were on location, but they actually had to, it was a building that had been condemned. They had to actually tear out the floor above this in order to lay rail, you know, through the ceiling.
When the camera goes high, when it's the God's eye view, to use your own words, we feel he's dead, don't we? And then he's not dead.
Yeah, well, that was intended to be kind of fooling the audience, which was, there's another way to look at this.
We've got the very end of the film now, Paul, because this is different from how you wrote it.
How much was it?
This is after the killing. So here he drives off. Yeah. In your script, he doesn't drive off. She says, maybe I'll see you again sometime, huh?
Uh-huh. Well, you have to understand that, of course, when they shot the film, she said that line.
Yes.
So you're not talking about a writing or directing decision. You're talking about an editorial decision. And editorially, Marty was moving on somewhere else, which was this notion, which I supported, of the film as a loop, and that it begins where it ends. And that the last scene of the film is the opening scene, and that the film is actually a loop, and it can be shown indefinitely. that nothing has changed. His pathology is still in place. Bob called me up once while we were shooting, and he said, you know, do you think this character Travis, because he was wearing my boots and my shirt at the time,
which is a very scary thing, I have to say.
And he said, do you think this character, do you think he would say this? I said, Bob, look, you know, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm working on something else. You're in New York. You're Travis Bickle. If you think he would say it, odds are he probably would.
But it's clear that Robert De Niro understood that you were Travis Bickle, and sometimes, yes?
Yeah, but that was a serendipity, you know. I mean, 3 young men at similar stages in their lives, coming across the same story, knowing the same story, knowing how to tell it, knowing why to tell it. You should never discount the factor of luck in motion pictures and art in general. Sometimes you just get lucky.
One of the critical conventions about your work is that there's too much style and not enough content or something like that. And obviously in the past there have been filmmakers like Joseph von Sternberg and people like that about whom the same things were said.
But it's very rare, and that's probably why directors that work like this are so rarely understood, because number one, there are very few practicing what we do, and so I think it's a kind of a very small fraternity, and most of the people writing about movies come from a kind of literary or dramatic tradition, and they're, you know, character and story and plot and whatever, you know, and you know, the big hole in Vertigo. I mean, you know, why didn't if Jimmy Stewart goes and looks at the body and sees that it's not Kim Novak, the whole thing is thrown out the window. But it really doesn't make any difference, because the other stuff is so engrossingly cinematic that these little things that come out of kind of a very kind of pedestrian plotting don't really harm the brilliance of the work.
So I mean, these questions about plausibility you're not too interested in. I have to say, I'm often not too interested in the plausibility of situations, but obviously the critics are, and I think audiences are. People come out and say, I don't believe that. Maybe,
yeah, but when you think of some of the...
Maybe you should go and direct opera where people don't mind about plausibility at all.
It's not a matter that it's implausible. I think the critics sort of lock on something, and that kind of directs the audience. There's a lot of discussion in Snake Eyes about why do we reveal who did it so soon. Well, the problem is it isn't about a mystery about who did it. It's a mystery about a relationship with 2 people and how finding that out affects their relationship. Yeah. It's not it never, you know, those kind of procedural mysteries are extremely boring, because basically what you're doing is going from place to place, getting information. A little more information, you put it together.
I agree.
What I love about it is, you know, people like Mick Jackson or Fred Skepsey or Dan, is that you can come up with a strange idea at the last minute, and often those are the best. It's not the idea you've thought about for a year and a half. It's like you might have taken that year and a half to get to the odd, strange idea, and they're perfectly willing to go along with it and shoot it.
Give me an example of that. Can you think of anything?
Well, I can think of one with L.A. Story, which was, I went to Mick and I said, you know, I've had this idea, Mick Jackson, the director, I said, I have this idea for the ending where all the street signs in L.A. All sort of join in chorus and play Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. And he said, I like it, you know, rather than I don't like it, you know. Yeah. And these are the things that, to me, that like make things, these odd, weird ideas.
Yeah. We had a specific thing that Forrest said, because Bob always said, look, I don't know if we're going to use this or not. And what Forrest said at the microphone was, in Vietnam, it can happen that your best friend would go home to his mama with no legs. And in Vietnam, it can happen that your best friend won't get to come home to his mom at all. And that's a bad thing. And that's all I have to say about that. And that was...
So the audience, the anti-war audience, would have accepted that?
They projected something that Forrest was saying that was somehow in defense of going to Vietnam, and the other people somehow projected onto it that he was saying something that was against it. But
So why did Zemeckis take those lines out then?
well, I
That's
think
very
it,
interesting.
I think it was because it was. I think Bob felt that it was ultimately unnecessary. And isn't it better to be pondering what he said as opposed to having the flat out example of what it is? It was a better question to ask for him. I don't want to put words into Bob's mouth, but
Yeah.
that's what he did.
And how did you decide how Forrest would be physically, the straight back and the way that he stares at people? Where did all that come from?
Young Michael Humphreys, who played young Forrest Gump, had a very particular physical style onto his own.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been possible for me to come up with something and make him sort of like imitate it. So I did just the opposite. I said, well, let me observe this guy for a while and see what would be the natural place to go once he grows up. So I hung around with him quite a bit and paid a lot of attention to what he was doing.
And ditto the voice.
Yeah, that's kind of sort of the way Michael speaks.
If you carry with you very, very good films, you carry with you the images that are thought, that were decided, that were chosen by somebody you respect and admire. You know that there is a moral attitude towards images. Godard said that it's a moral attitude to place the camera in the right side. Some people are shockingly filming people. It's aggressive, it's obscene. So you watch the images chosen by somebody. But with music, whatever, Bob Dylan, Wagner, Bach, it takes you where you want it.
You seem to be saying that music is more imaginatively open, that it allows your mind
exactly.
to move the way
and
it
to
lives
put
in
an
you.
end to our discussions,
Yes.
if I said I prefer books. No, I'm joking. I
Good, I'm
love
glad,
reading.
because then we'd be talking for another hour about that.
If you had a child and just one gift to give it, what would it be?
Oh, curiosity.
No, isn't she adorable?
If you have curiosity,
Yes.
you're never bored.
She's adorable.
It's a great answer, that, isn't it?
Of course.
Did that surprise you that she says the most important thing?
No, I knew she would. Because that's the zest of life. So many people are bored and not curious. You know, it starts around 35 years old. They're just like half dead. They have the impression they know everything. They're jaded, you know, blasé, and no curiosity, you know?
The American filmmaker David Lynch says that as you get older, your window closes, so you let less and less in, so you're less and less in contact with the world.
Well, I'm the opposite.
And yet, I think the reason why his films are so good is that he won't
Yes.
take any consideration of the rest of the world. It's just a projection
Yeah,
of
well,
his
because
fears.
he has an inner life. I mean, I'm talking about regular people. A man like David Lynch, his obsession draws him deep, deep, deep inside. But the more time passes by, the more I open up to everything. And sometimes it's exhausting.
Could you give me an example of what you
Well,
mean?
for example, Fanny Ardant wants me to direct her on stage in a Phèdre. And I don't want to do the Phèdre of Racine, but Sénèque. So since about 3 months now, I'm dwelling in the world of ancient Greece, and my daily companions are the gods.
You mentioned Racine there, and you were reading Racine before the age of 13 and things like that. Is that true?
Yes, because I wanted to be one of the heroines of Racine or Bérénice or Phèdre. So I learned, oui, prince, je languis, je brûle pour Thésée, je l'aime, non point tel que l'on vu les enfers. You know, I was learning that, and I was, to me, it was passion and jealousy and death, and I adore that.
It sounds to me as if you were reading people like that when other people of your generation were reading the more fashionable books by the early existentialists and things.
I didn't give a damn. And especially one phrase of Sartre, l'enfer c'est les autres, hell is the others. And I was so sure that hell was ourselves.
Why?
Because the most difficult thing you have to go through, they come from inside you. The demons I carry inside of myself, not the point of view of the others. Whatever they think of me, that's not the essential. It's that inner voice I have inside.
I was a prince of the paupers, crowned downtown at the beggar's land.
What's your name?
Jill.
What?
Jill.
For me, high school, public high school anyway, is one of the last times that there is kind of true democracy in America. Very, very quickly after that, economics start to separate people. But in high school, you may be sitting right next to the guy who's eventually going to collect your trash, and you're going to own a triple-decker house and, you know, be very kind of classy lawyer or whatever. And there you are, both taking earth science together, and to a certain extent being treated equally. But that kind of high school cutoff where some people go on to college and some people don't, you know, is a very, very sharp one. Another thing that's going on is that possibility that you can reinvent yourself somewhat. You say, well, this is who the people who knew me in high school thought I was this guy, this was my nickname. I don't have to be that person when I move on. Americans' ability and interest in inventing themselves and inventing a persona has always interested me. This is set in 1966, which was a time when you could literally go from a kind of 50s mentality in high school right into the late 60s. And so it was a bigger leap for Rosanna Arquette's character, Jill. Almost everything that she did that was cool in high school is uncool when she gets to college. And what you see her do is kind of deny this person who she used to be and cut herself off from this kind of 50s Trenton high school experience.
You never give me an inch! Not in high school, not ever! And we're good together, I know that! And all the rest, all the college, all the jobs, all the bullshit, that doesn't mean shit! Just you and me, that's what's important!
I'm not in love with you.
Why not?
It just doesn't work for me.
What the fuck does that mean? It's because of who I am, right?
What do you mean, who you are?
Oh, don't hear me that shit! Don't hear me that shit! On account of what I'm gonna end up, right? Right?
You've got your singing.
Oh, bullshit! I ain't ever gonna be anything. I'm gonna end up a fucking garbage man like my father.
Oh, that's not true.
Don't fucking talk down to me!
And then the arc of the movie takes her right back to the point where she's rejected by those new people. Yeah. And the last image in the movie is her dancing, you know, with this high school dropout ex-boyfriend of hers, very public in front of these new friends, with this guy who basically is a greaser. Yeah. And that's probably the first courageous thing she's done since she's gone to college. Yeah. Of saying, well, this is who I am too, take it or leave it.
Yeah. And talking about that time, the late 60s, you said a very interesting thing, that you didn't get politicized through groups or anything, but through paying attention. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, rather than okay, you join the SDS or whatever the Weathermen or whatever the political group was around, if you're paying attention, if you are saying, what are people saying, but then what are they doing? Do their actions and their ideals match up? And certainly there was an enormous amount of lying to the public that was becoming very apparent in the late 60s. And I think that some of the bitterness and the extremity of the reaction against society, and especially against the Vietnam War, but society in general then, is that it was coming from kids who had been fairly successful. These weren't the dropouts and the people who had always been marginalized. They were the people who had bought the line, who had been good Eagle Scouts and valedictorians and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, what they were seeing from the authority figures who they used to try to please was an awful lot of, well, they're saying one thing and they're doing something else. They're talking about freedom and democracy, and they're murdering people.
And did you feel distrustful about some of the radical people that you might have met at college?
Distrustful in general. I grew up in Italian neighborhoods, and I think somehow I absorbed this Italian distrust of any organized group. Certainly I had a couple problems with, the campus radicalism. One was that it was on a campus, and I couldn't take it that seriously because here you are up in the woods of somewhere, or pretty far away from the fray, and so do whatever you're going to do, but don't take yourself too seriously. This is not the front lines in any way. For me, during the Vietnam War, the crux of the whole thing was the draft system. Somebody came up with the idea of, we're losing too many really bright math and science people. We shouldn't have those people be grunts, so there should be a college deferment for those people. And then it got made into a college deferment for anybody who could go to college, which basically is a class thing.
Don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go.
That means that the people who are going to go and get shot at, by and large, are from a class who does not get to go to college.
And around that time in the mid-70s, you went to California and you started writing for a famous production company with Roger Corman.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn from him, apart from put naked girls in the picture?
Yeah, I think a lot of what was great about working for Roger is I wrote 3 movies, and in very short order, all of those movies got made, which is an incredible batting average.
Unique.
Basically, the way it's worked since then is the more I get paid for a movie, the less likely it is to get made, which something is wrong with that somewhere. But you got to write something, see it get made, see it on the screen, see what worked, what didn't work, talk to the directors about what corners they had to cut, because the budgets were always very, very, very low. Roger had directed dozens and dozens of movies. He had produced, over 100 at that point, I'm sure. So he was very specific with what he wanted.
If this was a good, interesting experience, why, when you came to direct, did you do something like your first film, Return of Secaucus 7, rather than a genre picture, rather than a...
Yeah, some of that is it's your life as well. What I knew from watching these guys direct these things is it's almost a year of your life, no matter what. And what are you going to spend a year of your life doing? Are you going to spend it doing something that, well, it might do your career some good, but you wouldn't necessarily go see it yourself? So I just never had that much interest in directing, a genre picture. There were plenty of people making them as well or better than I could. Why not do something that, I don't know who else is going to do this? And certainly when I made Return of the Secaucus 7, I hadn't seen a movie like that.
Roman, your films give people nightmares.
Do they?
They gave me nightmares when I was a kid.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Do you have nightmares?
Not that many. I think young people have more nightmares than the adults. Adults have them in the movies or in the books.
So does making films make you happy?
I'm happy when I find a subject that excites me, you see. That gives me a reason to make a film. And I'm still happy when I'm making it, because this is my real and true profession.
What do you think is the best of your films?
Well, I can tell you the first time that I felt that I really got it technically smooth was a Rosemary's Baby. I can tell you that the first time I made a film that would make me happy because I felt the humor and the tone, the way I like it, was the Vampire Killers. Chinatown was the first film where I had no struggle throughout the production, because I was totally supported by the producer and had everything at my disposal. I was really, like a racing driver with a bunch of people standing around you and just ready to, to respond to every gesture. So I know that it's maybe my greatest achievement because of that. And also because it deals with something more serious and more important than devils or vampires. I put the camera where I stand. I stand and watch the action. I stand and look what happens. And then I'm just trying to film it the way I saw it. It's simple.
Lots of people don't get it right, even though it's simple.
Well, I think that there are other things that people don't get right. You just have certain predestinations. Maybe I have them for this.
And you tell a story in your book where you had to pluck a hair out of her head or something like that.
It was a scene over her shoulder on Jack Nicholson, and there was one hair sticking. The light was hitting this hair, so the hair had to be dealt with. So hairdresser comes and fixes it, we roll and clap, and the hair is back again. It's a cut, it's a hair again. So he comes back, he fixes again, clap, roll. The hair is there again. Finally, I say, wait a moment, Faye, and I took the hair and plucked it. And
she went mad.
She went crazy. And that was the end of shooting that day. It's one of those days.
Whatever the relationship between you and her, whatever her unease on the set, it turned into a good performance, didn't it?
Well, it did. So for that reason, all the rest can be forgotten, and what matters is what remains on the film.
Mrs. Mulray, I think you're hiding something.
Well, I suppose I am. Actually, I knew about the affair.
How did you find out?
My husband.
And it's classic filmmaking in that scene, isn't it? There's like no camera moves.
I'm mainly an invisible witness to the events, you see. And my camera follows me, and for that I hate this convoluted moves which make you nauseous and interfere, in fact, with the story very often. I think if you have a story to tell, try to tell it in a simple or maybe elegant manner, and care about the emotions that it can evoke in those who are kind enough to watch it.
Now here's a scene where Jack Nicholson did his own stunt, a much less controllable situation. What do you remember about that?
I remember Jack said one take only, because it was him. He didn't have a stuntman. I wanted him to do this stunt. We didn't know what was going to happen. We couldn't rehearse this scene. I said, well, what can happen? You just, you swim. You're not going to be drowned. But
you risked the health of your star.
Well, what health, I think.
So here's the famous bit.
They lose their noses.
Why do people wince so much at that?
Because it's realistic. It looks convincing. In fact, I think it's not such a big deal to have a nose cut,
The blood really flies out, doesn't it? It doesn't just dribble.
It was well designed, the trick.
Who designed it?
I did, actually. But I think they also, Jack's acting has a lot to do with it, and the scene is dense and it's convincing.
Anyway, what about this scene coming up where your main characters kiss? Now, Robert Towne says that he felt it was very brave to do that in bathroom lighting. There's nothing romantic about the way this scene is lit.
Well, as long as you're unconventional, people enjoy it.
God. Something black in the green part of your eye.
It's flawed.
Joseph Brodsky, the Russian poet, gave a commencement lecture at Dartmouth University, and he talked to all those graduating students, and he said, today is the best day of your life. From now on, it's going to get boring and more boring. The more goods you acquire, the more money you have. Then he cautioned them, he said, try to stay passionate. Leave your cool to the constellations. Passion alone is a remedy against boredom. And that has been the driving force in my life, passion, the pursuit of whatever truthfulness you can find in acting, giving that to a director and hoping that he will take those pieces and use it for the benefit of his film.
You said this other thing, which is you said you became more like your father at the end of the 60s. You had a sense that every joy had its cost, and you said you developed a more Judaic sense of guilt. Was that again, were you referring again to the
Well,
murder?
I was referring, of course, to the murder, naturally, because it happened at such a peak of happiness of both of us. We were expecting a child. We were both working, and our professional life was also very successful. Why should it be just destroyed for no reason at all? Don't you think it's absurd enough? And don't you think it's a good time to ask yourself a question? Is there some kind of equilibrium in life that you have to pay for good times with bad times? And that's all. I don't.
Some people are lucky; they simply don't have bad times.
Well, it depends on what is the amplitude of your life, whether you leave it sort of flat or like this.
And yours is,
as they say, the higher you get, the harder you fall.
In Macbeth, the play, Shakespeare has this line, a great line: "Give grief words." And of course, what he's saying is that in order to respond to something awful that's happened to you, you need to express.
I don't know. Don't ask myself these questions. I don't let myself being psychoanalyzed because I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't feel the urge, and I do not self-analyze because I don't bother.
Yeah.
Don't you think there is a vague possibility that you make movies because you love movies?
Oh, absolutely. It looks to me as if, for example, a film like Fearless Vampire Killers is very much about the pleasure of making movies. But nobody, including you, works in a vacuum. And so, for example, like if you take the paintings in this room, they're paintings of naked ladies. One of the reasons why those paintings are made is because of the erotic feelings that the painters had about real women in the real world. Those painters also knew about composition and things like that.
I agree with you, absolutely.
So you can't, all I'm saying is that it's not wrong of me to talk about the way you draw, or any artist draws from their real life in order to make these things. Films, paintings.
Do you? Yes, but you're putting it a different way. You think that painting one of those naked lady helped this painter to release his sexual tensions?
In the case of Bouguereau, we know that it did, so it's not a good example you're using, but it's certainly an expression of what it's like to be alive, how great it is to be alive, and how awful it is to be alive.
From time to time. Joy and pleasure and rapture are the kind of spice of life, They're not the meat and potatoes of life. They occur now and then, and you can hang your existence on them, but it's not day-to-day existence.
You know how the Chinese call cinema? Cinema in China is called the electric shadow, which is very beautiful. The electric shadows, cinema is shadow, cinema is air, cinema is light and shadow. The tendency is more and more to make it heavy and ponderous and very often, I'm afraid, pretentious. All what I would like to do is to make movies which really pass in the front of the eyes, like two butterflies flying, kissing each other in front of the eyes of the audience.
Frankie, goddammit, get up your ass! I have to reload!
And why does the Russian boy come back, given that
I have no idea why. That was one of Peckinpah's little things, Yeah, but that was the end of the film, and I just laughed.
There's sweet boy. And then we start this thing, which is a series of photographs of kids being killed in wars.
Yeah.
And we've just heard kids singing. And what was Peckinpah you think, trying to say about kids? When you look at his films in general, it's always about innocence of children, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's what it's about. It's about the innocence of what we destroy. We destroy the innocence with some kind of ego, with some kind of madness, because of some kind of desire we have to make something stronger, I don't know, better. But nevertheless, war is now redundant. Even though they try all over the place, they're still trying to kill each other.
More. There you were, making love to the woman that you admired in the cinema.
Great moment.
You know why we picked you for this?
Just lucky, I guess.
No. I'd seen you before. Well, not really you. I mean, pictures of you in magazines and things, and some of your movies. And the way you walked, the way you filled a dress. Like you were made for guys to go crazy over. So I just went crazy.
Anyway, it wasn't the flavor you expected. Silver hair was a phony.
I like this better. I'm sorry, Ed.
That's all right.
You don't mind? All the guys you must have had.
Oh, hundreds.
Come on.
Listen, don't get me mixed up with that girl in the movies.
She's you, isn't she?
No, she's make-believe.
True.
And it's been great to discover that you are so much more than make-believe. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. A real thrill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. I've enjoyed it.
It's 2:45.
There are many things, I think, that are out there that we don't know about, but sometimes, you get certain feelings.
Never, oh never, nothing will die. The stream flows, the wind blows, the cloud fades, the heart beats. Nothing will die.
Good place to end.